right, welcome everybody. Welcome back. Probably a bunch of you. So we're gonna be a little bit quicker tonight. Hopefully, I generally jinx myself with that with our kind of intros and housekeeping stuff up front. We're gonna make an assumption that at least a percentage of you were here last night. But quickly, if you could, just put in the chat who was here last night versus who's showing up tonight. And if you wouldn't mind, we always like seeing where you're at in the country. It's always kind of fun for us. We know you're very likely class 2025, 24, or 25, 26, or 27 family. But if you're willing to share, just tell us, I was here last night. This is my first night, and and where you're at in the country. Yeah, appreciate that. Look at that. Covered a lot down south there. There we go. A couple newbies for tonight. Awesome. Yeah. New York City, Oregon. Go Boston, go Celtics. We were just talking about that in the green room before we went live here. But you guys are in great hands tonight, right? Let me start with housekeeping stuff. Again, especially for those of you that are new or weren't able to make it in the beginning last night. This is being recorded, right? So everybody's going to get this recording likely Friday. So what we're going to do in all likelihood is Friday, we're going to package each of the 3 bootcamp sessions and put those in kind of one. Our marketing team does an awesome job, just kind of this one nice deliverable where everything will live in one place for you all. If at any time you're like, hey, I missed this, I want this recording, whatever, write into support@collegeaidpro.com. We have an awesome team that again can get you this type of stuff as well. So that is that is kind of like the housekeeping stuff. And then we want you guys, last night was awesome. Okay, the night one crowd set a precedent in terms of the interaction and engagement. Listen, we have an idea of what we think you all should be learning and thinking about at this time, but we want to answer questions that are most relevant to you. Fire away, okay? Any question you have, if it's more on the personal side, it can be on just be anonymous, right? Write in your anonymous question, but put it in the Q&A, right? I know I'll have to remind you throughout the night, that's fine, but put it in the Q&A because that's where we're going to monitor. And we're going to live in one place. We're not going to be able to get to every question, everybody, right? We're going to do our very best. I guarantee we get to 100 plus, but we're not going to be able to get to every question. We'll talk about how you can engage with us beyond tonight. If you missed your question didn't get answered, but please don't take it personal. So very quickly, my name is Matt Carpenter, founder at College Aid Pro. Psyched to be here. This is the 20th year that I've shepherded college families through this process, which is wild to say, but I love it, right? This is what we do. This is what I do. This is a hard process to navigate. It gets harder every year. Quite frankly, it gets harder every single year. But we want to help people, find kind of their right path and just minimize the stress, the anxiety, the unknowns that are inevitable in some ways with this whole deal. So you heard me belabor it last night. The superpowers that we're going against in some ways, sorry to say it, but we are, colleges, federal government, Wall Street, their superpower is kind of convincing people to go at this alone. If you learn one thing this week, do not go at this alone. I don't care if you use our free resources. I don't care if you work with our competition, but don't do it alone, okay? And I mean that wholeheartedly. So tonight, I always love this particular presentation or some variation of it because I learned something every time. I'll be taking notes throughout the night. These are 2 of what I consider to be top admissions experts in the world when it comes to going to college in the United States of America. Dan Bisig, who's at least to my left, I don't know where he appears for you guys, but Dan Bisig is a little bit of a unicorn in our ecosystem in that he's an expert on both the admissions and the financial aid side. He's been doing it for more than 20 years or about 20 years, something like that. Very unique skill set. For most of us, it's one lane or the other, right? For me, it's the financial aid side only. For Brian, it's the admission side only. Obviously, there's some overlap, but we're not experts in both, right? In the way that Dan is. I'm going to let him say hi in a second here, but he's just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, in the Great state of Kentucky. And then we have Brian Ford here in my home state, right? Another North Shore boy, God love him. Another Celtics fan, God love him. But he's somebody that, again, we've been fortunate enough to have a relationship with for a decade plus. What makes him unique is that he's been on that college side of the fence. He's read 60,000, I'm sure that's an estimate, but 60,000 admissions applications, right? For Boston University, for the UCs, for Bryant University. He's been in these admissions committees to say, here's why I think this kid should get in or not or whatever. So that perspective is just invaluable. And now he's been on the other side of the fence, both on the private side and working for some really prestigious high schools, private high schools here in the Boston area. So Dan, why don't you say hi quick, and then we'll pass it to Brian, then I'll kick us off.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Well, welcome, everybody. Super excited to be with you this evening. Dan Bisig here. And as Matt was saying, I am a little bit unique in the fact that I was a financial planner actually for 25 years. And then 18 years ago, actually started helping families with the college process and absolutely fell in love with it because I quickly realized there was an integration of both the funding and the admission side. So again, great to be with you. Brian?
Yeah. I would agree. I would also say another thing about Dan that's unique. He's probably one of the kindest people in college admissions. It's why we call him Ted Lasso around our group. In a year that's been very pessimistic, it's great to have a Dan around. Yeah, my name is Brian Ford again. For the really past 20 years, my career has been centered around college admission and wanting to provide kids access and opportunity to higher education, and have spent the last 10 years, primarily working at different high schools. Currently serve as the director of school and college counseling at Boston College High School, just south of Boston in Dorchester, Mass. But I've also worked privately with families all across the country and really all across the world, and have really, I feel like there's always something that surprises us all every year, but I feel like I've seen most things at this point within the college admission realm, and just love that ability to kind of work one-on-one with families and help them figure out the puzzle piece that is college admissions.
It is a puzzle indeed, well put. And then let me get cooking here. So quickly before I kick it back to Brian here. And again, we're College Aid Pro. Our mission, we scream this from the mountaintops for anybody that will listen to us and try to walk the walk every day. Look at those gents. Not bad. So for whoever has not, if you haven't done this already, and it's great to see, we actually saw that just about all of you have, which is awesome. But we always get this question, where do we start? Guys, where do we start? Set up your free CAP account, okay? Because it's going to tell you, am I eligible for financial aid? Am I eligible for scholarships? At what colleges? How much are these schools actually going to cost me, right? So at a minimum, don't overthink this one. Set up your free MyCap account. And obviously, we did, for those of you that were with us last night, we did kind of something we've never done last night in terms of a giveaway, or in terms of a special, you might say. We heard some noise about that this morning for people that missed it or watch a recording. So we're going to extend that. I'll talk about that at the end today, but we are going to extend that through the week. But at a minimum, get your free account set up. So as you're starting to think about colleges and talking about colleges at home, making sure where they fit in your affordability spectrum. And, we'll spend some time in there as well.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So the main part of today is to kind of talk about really the architecture of building a college list and how do we get to those pieces. And so what I want to do is kind of provide kind of a 30,000-foot overview about kind of how a college list comes to be, some of the factors that, I, Dan, the other experts at College Aid Pro, the counselors that I work with, that we think about when we're building college lists. But also really the nuance that goes along with not only just building a list, but really building a list that's productive and is balanced and is going to provide opportunities for students kind of regardless of what happens in the college admissions process. So, there's the obvious kind of thing in numbers. Now, if you look at kind of national averages right now, the average is right around 10 schools. That can vary already. I'm already getting into variety here, depending on kind of who your student is, where they are located in the country, what academic interests they might have. But where you're going to find a lot of lists right now of the students that I'm working with, they fall somewhere in between 10 to 14 schools that students will ultimately apply to. Now, that original prospective list obviously needs to be much bigger. You'll see in a future slide, college admissions works like a funnel. And actually, yeah, bring it up right now. Let's just do it. This is like a really good kind of overview of what that funnel looks like. You want to start with like 25, 30, 35 schools, sometimes even. And the reason behind this, so when I'm building kind of an original college list for a student that I'm building, and families that have worked with me in the past know this, I'm sending a lot of schools. I'm gaining a really good perspective of the student. Who are they as a person? What are some of their must-haves? What are some of the things that they're excited about college? And I'm throwing out some schools that fit that mold perfectly. And I know Dan does this too. I like to throw a curveball every now and then, once in a while too. And what that does to me is it allows me to kind of really verify what the student is interested in, but also what it does for the student, and it allows them to go through kind of this internal auditing process of what actually they truly value in a prospective institution. And so by the time we get down to maybe those 15 to 20 schools that we're starting to inquire, maybe reach out to, show some demonstrated interest, and then really build down to that list of schools that we're actually going to apply to, there's this real kind of strength and confidence in our list because those schools have kind of been put in the ringer. They've been compared to other institutions. We've had conversations about them. We've talked about the potentials surrounding deadlines and things like that. And so for me, I always like to build that first list big. And I always explain to the families, like, that's not me saying we're going to apply to 35 schools. But I always get worried when a family maybe comes to me and says, hey, we visited 6 schools and these are the 6 schools we're going to apply to. Because I want to make sure that they have confidence in those schools that they're applying to, and that they've gone through that kind of internal auditing process. So one of the biggest things that we look at when we're looking at schools is obviously the academic balance of the schools. And one of the things that I've actually started to do, and while it's important to talk about this, and we will, many times I'll have students look at schools and not have them kind of have an idea of where they may fall within that safety target or reach, because I want students to have that kind of authentic first impression of a school without necessarily right away thinking like, all right, what's my admissibility here to this institution? But we're looking for balance when we're building these. And so we're looking for a number of target schools, which is where you fall in that middle 50%, kind of that competitive balance of a student. We're looking for some safety schools that, while you'll never hear me guarantee admissions to any school, and many counselors operate that way. We're looking at schools that we feel confident about their chances to not only get admitted, but maybe also receive some merit money. And then there's those reach schools, which it's very healthy to have those reach schools on your list. One of the things as students are preparing lists and starting to tell me their interests, I don't allow them to get deterred from putting maybe too many reaches on their list right away, and them thinking, oh, maybe I'm doing this by the wrong way. I always tell kids, it is not my job to tell you where to apply to and where not to apply to. It's my job to ensure that you have a well-balanced college list. And so if you come at me and you say, well, my top 4 schools right now are all reaches, and that's kind of what's panicking me, then that's great. We're going to have a really in-depth conversation about what you love about those 4 schools, kind of outside of just maybe the admissibility or the name brand of those schools. And we're going to find some safety and target schools that fit those same narratives. And that's where, again, having kind of a strong counselor really helps you in terms of building that list and kind of poking and prodding until it comes together into a big piece. And the academic balance, it fills in a lot of things. It's not only just GPA and not only SAT and ACT scores. And as we're seeing, especially for a lot of those top name brand schools, they're starting to require those now that kind of that COVID period of being test optional has ended. But we're also looking at the academic rigor. What are the courses that you've taken in high school? How have you challenged yourself in comparison to the curriculum that was offered to you at your specific school? And how is that going to balance out with your GPA and with your SAT scores that give us somewhat of a framework of where you may fall kind of in the target, reach, or safety category? Did you want to jump in here, Dan?
You got it. Yeah, thanks, Brian. So one of the things I'll share with you is obviously last night, if you were on the first day's presentation, you heard both Matt and Peg really go into depth about understanding the financial aid fit, that understanding of what does that really mean, what kinds of schools are you looking at? And that's why when Brian's talking about this idea of the different kinds of schools that you're going to look at, are you considering in-state schools versus out-of-state when it comes to the tuition? And there can be a significant impact on this. I mean, I think of a school like the University of Michigan, where you look at the in-state versus the out-of-state, where it's like a humongous increase, for that out-of-state student. Not to mention a school that doesn't give a lot of aid out to somebody. And so in particular, when it comes to scholarships, so one of the ways that you for sure can utilize and work through this process, and in particular use the MyCap software, is looking for those opportunities where scholarships are going to be given to your student based on their academic successes. I mean, the whole rigor that Brian was just talking about really can make a difference. And in fact, with some of the colleges, for sure, that's what they're going to use, is they're kind of narrowing down the list of people. But one of the things we want to talk about tonight first is this whole idea of how are you going to apply? How's the student going to actually apply to the school? Are they going to do the early decision, restrictive early action? You may not even know what that means, but that's a situation where they then can apply to other colleges early action. And by the way, Brian, I bet you're like this too. I'm a huge fan of early action because of the fact that it gives a student plenty of opportunities, and in particular looking at schools that are likely going to hopefully award them scholarships. Early decision, you get to apply to one school. Same way with the restrictive early action. So, and how about those schools that are out there too that might be regular decision, or you've maybe heard of this ED2, early decision 2, or even rolling. It's confusing, as we say here, right? I mean, that's really what can happen. You really kind of have to approach this whole thing. So to kind of put this in the perspective, again, early decisions binding. You get to pick one school, folks. It's one college that the student is losing or is applying to. There is the opportunity for you, if you're in a financial bind there, to still appeal. But you need to know going in what your net cost looks like. And you have to be careful because you can lose leverage. I mean, that's the whole idea, is that you've done all your homework up front. You know what you're getting into. Early action, again, huge fan, big fan of this whole thing. It really can increase your chances. And by the way, just so we throw it in there as well, there are definitely colleges that there's a much larger percentage of students that are being admitted early decision 1, sometimes early decision 2, the more selective colleges that are out there. You really, want to look into that. And then finally, the regular decision, you're going to find that there's plenty of programs out there that are open to students truly applying, getting a chance to get in. You just have to watch it, because many of those scholarship opportunities, again, are really going to be tied to those early action deadlines. So any other thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, I think you did hit the nail on the head. I think if you read the New York Times every day, you would think that every student applies early decision somewhere. And
Yeah.
while that certainly can be used as a strategy and can be a good fit for certain families, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for every family. That financial piece is so crucial. It's something we talk about really with all of our families at College Aid Pro. It's something I talk about with all the families I work with at BC High, that if you're going to take that leap of faith, it's a leap of faith in all senses of the application process. And I also think it's important to note, as you said, like a lot of schools have very much shifted their strategy, whether it be with early decision and early action or restrictive early action, that they're filling 50, maybe 60, sometimes even 70% of their freshman class through those pools. And then they're kind of using regular decision to kind of pick and choose to fill the holes of their class. That's certainly a trend we've seen more in the past couple of years. And so that's a key element of where I feel like I can help families. I know you can help families. It's certainly something I do with the students I work with at BC High. We're not only looking at those schools on the list, but we're looking at, what about this school? Does it change from a target or reach depending on the deadline that you're applying to? And so if you're a student on the line and you decide, I think I want to apply to BC or NYU, maybe early or restrictive early action, well, maybe I'll list that as a target. But if you tell me, like, I think I would just want to do regular decision, then I may list that as a reach, just because being realistic of some of those external factors that come into play. And sometimes it's not about the student, but it's about the institutional priorities.
Yeah, and let me just add my color to this, and then I want to kind of give a visual within the platform for everybody to kind of be able to see how we help folks kind of make the decision with the assistance of the technology. But this is how I articulate it, right? And I think we're more or less on the same page. Everybody has a different talk track, but if somebody asks me, hey, should we apply early decision to this particular college? I'll put a couple questions back to them. And how I frame it is I say, listen, you got to check two boxes with a lot of confidence as a family. Number one, this has to be the school that for your kid, for the student, this was like they were one of those small percentage of students that had this epiphany, like, this is where I need to be. This is my place. I'm in love with this school. If I get in, this is where I'm going, full stop, right? So that's one big box you have to check. The other one is you have to know about how much this college is going to cost your family over the course of 4 years. And we spent a lot of time last night talking about the fact that sticker price is usually irrelevant, right? But you have to know about how much is this school going to cost me. Stare at that. Okay, stare at that real number and be able to say, you know what, we can pull this off as a family. If you can check both of those boxes with a lot of confidence, let's go. You have our blessing, not that you need it, right? But let's go. If we're hesitating on either one of those, that's why I would have a little bit of pause, right? So again, that's kind of how I answer that pretty important question, right? So this is, again, if you haven't created your profiles, guys, do it right now, because this is where you're going to find out, well, how much is Amherst College versus NYU versus BC versus UMass going to cost me, right? Am I going to get a scholarship? Am I going to get need-based financial aid? How much? This is where we need to know, you know, what is the outcome going to be? How does this, over 4 years, when we bake in inflation and kids going in and out of college versus our budget, what's this outcome look like? Right. So again, leverage the technology. That we like to consider ourselves a source of truth, right? So any schools you're curious about, put them in here, right? We talked about, is this any school we click on, right? So if I go to click on UMass Amherst, for example, and is it a safety? Is it a reach? Is it a target, right? Obviously, those are gray areas. There's no, it's not firm. It's a very nuanced process, like a lot of things here. But for every school, we're going to tell you, here's their average GPA, here's their average test scores, right? So you can get a sense of where does your kid fit, right, within that particular college's range, right, or averages. Okay, and I know Brian talks a lot about the middle 50%, and you're going to in just a bit here. But then again, when we talk about affordability, what are, in addition to what schools are going to cost us, how do we proactively find schools that are going to give us scholarships? And that's where, again, you leverage a platform. Show me schools that are close to my house, and I prefer smaller schools, and I want to major in business. Okay, you can search just based on that, and then go say, and then show me who's going to give me the most in scholarships, and it'll automatically rank order, right? Maybe you guys haven't been talking about St. Michael's College at home, but if they're going to give you 32,000, maybe we take a drive to Burlington, Vermont. Nice city, nice little city. If we're eligible for financial aid, we can sort just based on that, right? And maybe we haven't been thinking about Clark, but if they're going to give us a lot of need-based financial aid and it's going to be within our budget, that's great. So again, if you haven't created your account, make sure you do it, because this is how you can figure out where the cost piece fits with the admissions piece. So I want to go out of my way to jump in there, guys, but sorry to interrupt, and I'll get back into the slides. Brian, I know we hammered the early decision piece probably, so I don't want to over rotate on it too much, but at the same time,
yeah, but I think it's almost important to put theory into practice here, and seeing just some of the numbers that came out. Now, this is from our previous admission cycle. So obviously this year's admission cycle is just finishing up. And because of, the really debacle of the FAFSA, a lot of the info that we're getting from colleges is a little delayed this year. And so, when you join us for webinars later this summer, which I'm sure you all will, we're going to have some great updated data for you. But we're really just, what we're seeing is just early deadlines are more popular than ever. But it's important to note that they're more popular than ever with those name brand schools. So we're even doing kind of against what I made fun of a little bit earlier, and that if you read New York Times, you'd think there are only 30 colleges in the United States. But there's actually a number of schools that have, different approaches and different realities when it comes to early decision and early action. One of the stats that I love to throw out there that kind of throws parents for a loop is, you know, the average accept rate in the United States is over 70% to college. But if you read, you know, mainstream news, you wouldn't think that. And so those schools that a lot of students really yearn for and push for, such as the Ivies, such as the new Ivies, as they've been dubbed by Forbes magazine, like BC, like Georgetown, schools like that, they're just seeing huge swings into students applying early. And so December 1st is really no longer a thing anymore in college admissions. November 1st is kind of the main deadline. I'm afraid to say in 3 to 5 years, Dan and I will probably be saying that October 15th and October 1st is the main deadline. It's just getting moved forward and forward.
Maybe freshman year.
Yeah, we're going to apply
by
when
the time my daughter goes to college.
Yeah,
that's what
my
deadline
daughter
is.
turns 6 in November, so we'll be applying in the fall. And so I think really what it comes down to is this just is a change in culture for sure, but a change in strategy for us as counselors as we work with students too. Over 80% of the students that I worked with, both privately and at my school last year, had at least 3 November 1st applications. And so that just gives you more of a framework, if nothing else, of the workload that's going to be expected of that student as we're building that college list. And that's why it's crucial. You can't wait until July or August before your senior year to start your college list, because you need to be doing work on your applications in July and August of that senior year, working on supplementals, filling out the Common App, so that when it gets to September or October and your son or daughter is, you know, also in the first quarter of their senior year trying to do a great job. Maybe they're playing a state tournament for the final time as a senior. Maybe they're nailing that lead in the school play that they've been working for 3 years. And then, oh, they're also trying to enjoy their senior year of high school. You know, you've done a lot of that legwork.
How dare they? How
isn't
dare
that
they?
crush point leading into November 1st. And then these are just some of those early round admission rates, and you see just kind of the change from year to year. Again, we'll have some updated data for you guys for this past cycle, but you know what I'll say from the data that I've seen and correlated, it got even more abstract this year, where for many competitive schools, that kind of oversight of we're going to use early action and early decision to really build our class. There was a great question in the Q&A earlier, like what's the benefit of this for the schools? Schools have a target number that they're looking to build. And this is something we're constantly thinking about as we're building college lists. And I mentioned it earlier, but there are 2 key cogs of the college admissions process. There's the student piece, and then there's the institutional piece. And there's all these student variables of grades and GPA and SAT scores and extracurriculars and stuff we're about to talk about. There's also that institutional side. What is the number of students they're looking to enroll for this specific year? Is there a particular major that maybe they were down on in previous years that they need to build up? Is there a certain population of students, whether it be male or female, or from a particular area of the country that maybe they've over-enrolled that they kind of need to course correct in previous years? These are things that A, you may never know about, or B, we may know, but there's nothing we can do to change that because it's the school's, you know, priority to build those kind of stances for themselves that we need to react to and work with students and understand that, again, you may have the same profile as a buddy who's 2 years older than you. I may list a school as a target for him, and it may be a reach for you just based on that year and what we know about kind of that school's current admission cycle. And then these are all the other pieces that come into building a college list. You know, as we're looking and building out students, it's not just about the grades and where do they fit, but, you know, what type of demonstrated interest do you need to show? So what demonstrated interest means is kind of official communication in many different ways that you're showing with the school, whether that's emailing with the college rep, speaking with them when they visit your high school, going to college fairs, visiting campus or regional reception. There's the supplemental essays. Supplemental essays have become increasingly more popular, and particularly became even more popular this past year after the affirmative action ruling that occurred last summer. Schools, in a great way, I think, added essays to allow students to speak to their identity. But what that did was it added essays that students then had to write. And so Dan and I'll never forget the conversation we had at the national conference in September when we're comparing. I was like, I got this student who's got 37 essays. I got this student who's got 25 essays. Those are numbers that have never been worked with really before this year. And now that's kind of the norm. And that's not even for the students that are applying even to the uber competitive schools. And so it's knowing and being prepared. And I think particularly for parents, and it's not to say that you're ignorant to the situation, but it's no longer, I fill out that one application and do that one 500-word essay, and now I'm done. It is weeks and weeks of writing, and these essays play key roles, not only in the admission stage, but also in the scholarship phase as well too, in terms of you showing genuine interest to some of the programs or the qualities or the mission statement of these schools. Obviously, we're not going to go too deep into it because I think it could be its own webinar, and we've done full webinars on it, but test optional policies play a huge role. If you're a student who's one of those great students in the classroom, but 4 hours on a Saturday morning isn't just really your thing, and that's totally fine. We can build a really good list for you, but that's going to look very different than maybe a student who has the same GPA as you, because we're going to find schools that are really amendable and are not only just test optional and name only, but are truly test optional in terms of how they operate. And then there's obviously those additional caveats like interviews, honors programs, and then are you a prospective athlete? Are you considering an arts program? So is there now a portfolio that's required of you, or a rehearsal that's required of you? Or are there other particular special programs you're interested in, like an accelerated medical or a 5-year MBA or engineering program? Maybe you're looking for a 6-year physical therapy program. All of these play into building a productive and constructive college list. And so again, it's very easy. You can Google in what's a good college list for a student with this GPA, and you'll get something spit back out to you. But there's a real science to this that involves both data and then also experience and having a feel and relationships with these schools to understand what they're looking for in particular students.
Yeah, and what I'll double down on, Brian, and this is something that you've coached me up on specifically, is that the demonstrated interest piece, which I know is more important than it ever has been now. And it makes a ton of sense, right? And specifically what students should be doing is building a relationship with an individual at their top college choices, right? Number one, that can make a difference in admissions decisions, right? And again, guys, it makes a ton of sense, right? These kids have the same GPA, the same test scores, they both have these great resumes, but this counselor has a bit of a relationship with this student. They're going to advocate this one gets accepted. That's A, right? So it can have an impact on admissions. Also on the financial side, right? Something we spent a little bit of time talking about last night is once we get a financial offer from a college, we always want to go back and ask for more money and get more money. That's a huge part of this whole process. If the student has a relationship with an admissions counselor and the first time that admissions counselor is hearing from them is way before when they're going to ask for some more money, right? That's maximizing our odds. And again, Brian's been on that side of the fence. He's going to be more motivated to give that student more money. He's known them for a year or whatever it's been, right? 18 months. So it's obvious, right? But I don't think it's common knowledge to everybody.
You're totally right, Matt. And I've given kind of the example of like my doldrum days of winter reading when I was on the college side. When I was working at BU, we're reading somewhere between 80 to 100 applications a day. And so when you're going through those names and it's a human process, it's crucial to remember this, that these are humans that are reading these. They come with emotions and ability to connect with people. And so if there is, that student that has reached out to me, and I've given so many different examples, and then they come up in that pile, just naturally, the heart's going to skip a little faster. And I'm going to read that with a different lens than just a piece of paper. I've said it ad nauseum, but the more you make yourself a person in this process, the better you're going to do, instead of, just being that piece of paper on the desk. So.
Yeah,
Let me
exactly.
throw one other. Yeah. I'm sorry. Let me just throw one other thing in. When it comes to test optional, I mean, let's not forget too that there are states like the entire state of Florida with their public schools,
Absolutely,
where there's no test optional. So if your kiddos are looking at applying to those kinds of schools, University of Florida, University of Central Florida, and so forth, get ready. You got to get those test scores. Those on the West Coast, like out in California, where it's become optional for, well, in fact, blind for the UCs and the CUs and so forth. Well, that's not the case with some of these other schools. And we know that the most selective colleges are all doing what? They're all going down the domino effect. They're all starting to add these test scores again. So make sure you do your homework on all of that.
And what would I say, Dan, is that's just another example of, unfortunately it's not to add stress, but why it's so crucial to start earlier is you
Yeah.
can't start building that list in July and decide, okay, I want to go to UF, or I want to go to Florida Atlantic, or I want to go to Florida Gulf Coast. Oh, wait, I haven't taken the SAT yet, and now I have to take the SAT because I'm going to apply. Or I've also had those students that, they take the SAT 4 or 5 times, and then they realize their top school is UC Davis. And I'm like, okay, well, the UO California state system is test blind, which means, yeah, your 1600 is awesome, but it means nothing to them in the process. Right. And so, it's not only building your list so that we can help build a list, it's helping build your list so that maybe we can save you a little bit of time and money on studying for the SAT as well, too. I always like to talk about kind of as you're thinking about different characteristics.
And sorry, Brian, let me
Yeah.
jump in for one more point there. But and this is going to be a big emphasis tomorrow night, because I do want to make it known that for those of you that are listening, they're like, we're very likely going test optional. Our students are not great test takers. So we shouldn't, because that's our main point of emphasis tomorrow night is around, the should we go test optional? Should we send our test scores or not? How do we maximize our odds of increasing, having the best score possible? Should we do the ACT, SAT, both? That's tomorrow night. But another reason that we want you guys to make sure that you're at least creating your free accounts is right in there. You can, within your platform, you can say, well, what if my test score my ACT went from a 24 to a 27? How would that impact my merit-based scholarship at Loyola Chicago, right? And it'll do that instantaneously. So as you guys are thinking about, should we take the test, how, or should we hire a tutor? That can hopefully help influence or inform, I guess, your decisions there, where really quickly you can say, okay, well, if we get this up 3 points, that's going to equal $15,000 more dollars. Maybe it's worth it here. So anyways, again, that's the idea. We're trying to help allow you guys to make informed decisions, right? Sorry, Brian, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no worries. So one of the things that I always work with students when I'm kind of essentially building out what I think is most important for them, and when they're struggling to come up with like a good list, or more importantly, struggling like, I don't really know what I'm looking for in a school. I always like to give them the front of the brain and the back of the brain characteristics of a school, and kind of talk about, so these are the obvious ones. If you talk to anyone who is in college admissions or isn't in college admissions, and they'll give you good advice. Like, okay, well, where do you want to go? What's the size of the campus? Where is the campus located? Is it a residential? Does it have what you're interested in? And you're a big basketball guy. Okay, they have a basketball team. You can go watch the basketball games. Like, these are kind of the obvious things. These are great starting points. This cannot be the only way you build a college list. There are so many other characteristics that come into play, and those are the back of the brain ones. And so it's not only, what is the size of the school, but what is actually the class size? What is the classroom that you're going to be sitting in? Are you going to be in those lecture halls for 4 years? Or are you going to be maybe truncated as you go on? And that's what you're looking for. So the example I always give is Northeastern, huge university, 25,000 plus undergrads, even more graduates. But their average class size after freshman year is only right around 40 students. That's bigger than maybe a few students here or there than some of your high school classes. And so many times students will, say no to a school because they just look at the undergraduate population and not realize what that actually means in the grand scheme of their specific major or things like that. These are questions you need to be asking when you're going on tours. Not how many undergraduates do you have, but how many undergraduates are in your mechanical engineering program? And what is the average class size for that? If that's the major I'm going to take. That's a much better question. It's going to give you a much better idea. I always ask, what is the idea of faculty? Are they remote? Are there a lot of adjunct? Are they full-time? I myself went to a smaller school. Matt was the same way. And part of that was like, I needed that faculty interaction to be successful. I needed to be able to ask questions. I think it's come across very much in this. I'm an extrovert. I needed that interaction with my faculty. Some people want that. No, I can just work through a TA. I kind of want to be just a hole in the wall or a fly in the wall and get my work done that way. It really depends on what you're looking for. One of the things that I always get frustrated about when kids say like, hey, I visited campus, and I'll ask them like, oh, like, what do you think about the town? And they're like, what do you mean the town? It's important to know that that's going to be a big part of your life too. And so that external location, what is there to do around town? Are you looking for a job? You know, are there places students can get a job? What are your transportation options? Not every school allows, you know, cars on campus. Particularly freshmen are usually the one that maybe have to wait a year before they can bring one on. And so what is your way? And then this is something I always say crucial, and it's important to know that most schools do, but what is the community's kind of stance on the college students? You know, has there been attention recently, or is it one of those towns, you know, like a Burlington, Vermont that we talked about, that it's like, all right, is that town the same without U of M or UVM? You know, you think about Michigan. Is Ann Arbor without Michigan? Probably not. And so it's having that understanding of how that external brings out. I always love bringing out the campus layout. Again, I went to a smaller school. I loved that I could roll out of bed at 7:56 and make my 8 a.m. class, but that's not everyone. Maybe someone wants to go to a school like a Notre Dame with that big Gothic architecture and walk across the quad every morning and see all those people. I was more of the I'm going to shuffle out in my sweatpants kind of guy and go to the one academic building and go to class that way. And then another thing that I think students don't really take into account is, you know, how do you best learn? You know, what about you and your strengths as a student that do you want to maybe see in that college aspect? So for me, again, I loved that the school I went to, I was a finance and management undergrad, is, you know, it put me in group projects right away. I got to, you know, again, share that extroverted side and be working with people, work on my public speaking, fully aware as I work with students, that's not for everyone. And so maybe you want to ask those questions of, you know, what is an average classroom experience like? Am I going to be expected to present a lot, or is it more of like a discussion base? Am I someone who would rather just write a lot of papers, or am I someone who wants to be in the lab and working in that way? What are those type of things? And then we've obviously talked a lot about the admission requirements already today and how that fits into building a list. And then, you know, we've talked a little bit about this, but these are just other pieces that we think about when we're helping students build lists. And so we, you know, specific majors like engineering, pre-medical or dental, nursing, physical therapy, those lists maybe tend to be a little bit bigger. Dan and I have talked about nursing applicants in the past and how those lists have to just be bigger because of the competitiveness. It's going to change, you know, how we approach the SATs and ACTs with you. There are certain ones, especially those accelerated medical and accelerated dental, it's exposure to the field and what that looks like and how you can get into summer programs or things. We'll talk about maybe particular curriculum requirements. If you're applying to business or engineering and calculus is offered at your school or other high level, we're going to encourage you to try to get as high in math as you can. We'll help you in terms of, okay, are there specific requirements surrounding letters of recommendation for those schools? And then one of the most important things too is, you know, what's the cost of applying to some of these? What's the cost if you're adding on with some of these particular programs? These are all things we think about once we get to know, you know, you as a student and you as a family, and then how we help build your list.
Yeah, so I'm gonna add some just a little bit of my own commentary here, and then I'm gonna put a question to you, Dan. I'm curious to get your take on this, and then I have a couple more things to share. The how I've looked at this, I forget who framed it this way. I can't take credit for it. I think I've stolen it. But I will say that I did not make this up, but it really resonated with me, right? Where college is so competitive now, right? And it's so nuanced, both the admission and the financial aid process. And it's like these kids and you guys as a family unit, you've worked your butts off for now 16, 17, 18 years, right? You've built this house, but kind of the, I guess, maybe harsh reality of it is in some ways, and it's almost not good enough, right? And I hate to say it that way, right? But say these target schools that you're applying to, you're right there in terms of your GPA, your extracurriculars, your test scores. So who gets in and who doesn't comes down to not just building the house, but the nuance of how do we stage it? How do we market the house, right? How does it show up on Zillow and the internet? And like, that's kind of, and again, right or wrong, what the admissions process has become. It's just so nuanced. So it's like, you want to do everything you can to try to figure out, okay, our grades are what they are. our our test scores are what they are, but what are these kind of smaller things that we can all control and fit in our favor to allow that target to get a yes, to all of a sudden make that reach a little bit more attainable, right? And again, the more I learn about the admissions process and talk to these guys, that's kind of the name of the game, right? Everybody has different natural skill sets, but it's like, what are these kind of smaller things that we can control that are just going to help us maximize our odds? That's all we can do is stack the deck in our favor, right? But Dan, this is kind of a tough one, right? I don't know that you have this one like teed up. And I'm just specifically for me curious to get your answer, but somebody approaching this for the first time, you're working with your kid, you know, specifically through the admissions process, like what is like I don't know if it's the biggest piece of advice or theme or like what's kind of like the first thing that you know, when parents come to you and are like, Dan, we don't know where to start. Is this going to work out? Like, help us. How do you answer that question?
No, I mean, it's really a great question. You know, sometimes people talk about this thing called the hook. In other words, or you've heard it maybe called, I know Brian has for sure, the passion project, something that the student is doing that's making them stand out from the rest of the crowd. I used to describe it that, you know, if we're looking at a sea of all these applicants that all look the same, like you said, with all the grades, the same curriculum and all the other kind of stuff, what's that one kid in the background who's got his red hair sticking straight up and he's caught the attention of those admissions people because he's doing something that's unique? Or the fact that in his essay, he really has demonstrated an incredible amount of impact that he's been able to make in his community, or with that one thing. You know, I think sometimes what happens is people think it's got to be this barrage of stuff that they've done. But the truth of the matter is, it can be that one thing that they've really done that has made such a difference. And it's not only has it impacted their community, but it impacted them. I mean, and the kind of characteristics and traits that really come out of that essay. Because you have to remember, if everybody else looks the same, it's going to be those letters of recommendation. It's going to truly be that essay that demonstrates you're the right kind of student that fits exactly what they're looking for on their campus so that they can say yes. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is get them to say yes. And so that's what I would say to you is, it's not just about all the grades. You know, Brian said that. It's, you know, the formula is so much more complicated to that, especially when you're applying to these top tier schools, because of the, you know, the competitiveness of the applicants.
And I mean, it's such a good point, right? Because it's like from the, you know, just seeing the data that we're privy to from the volume of applicants that these colleges get, could literally be 100,000 of them that meet the grade requirements. They meet the test scores. They meet the extracurriculars. Every box is checked, but there's only so many spots, right? So how do you separate, right?
You hit the nail on the head, Matt. You know, one of the things that I do appreciate about some schools is they are just open and honest. And Duke is one of those schools. You know, their admit rate is right around 8-9%. But what they were frank in saying is about 35% of the students that applied to our school were admissible. And so what that tells you is, you know, there was, you know, 25-26% of students that just because of numbers were a good fit for Duke, but they couldn't admit. And so again, that's where those differences of writing that really strong essay, getting strong letters of recommendation, working hard to really differentiate yourself makes a difference.
100%. So I want to make sure that I leave enough time here for next steps. Now, a couple of things, like I said at the top, we had last night we did kind of a one night only deal where and this was a first for us, which it was, where for the premium access to our software, we were charging, instead of the $149, $24.99. So essentially $25. And then we had a whole bunch of other, I think, really meaningful add-ons that were brand new. This just went live yesterday. Actually, let me make sure that I put this in the chat for everybody. But long story short, a bunch of people wrote in and said, hey, I missed it. I couldn't. We're extending this through the week. So if you want to get into our community, into the club, which gives you unlimited access to the software, right? You can see who's going to give me financial aid, who's going to give me scholarships, how much, you know, what's unlimited number of colleges, what are they going to cost me? make sure that you sign up, right? And again, don't overthink that, guys, or at least do the free membership. But again, this is a new one for us. I just put this link into the chat so you can sign up right now. In addition to that, for our members, we're going to do bi-weekly office hours, right? So it's going to be at least 2 experts to answer your questions. And then every other week, so it'll essentially be once a week, we'll be doing member-only workshops. We have this AI-empowered kind of chatbot to answer your questions, which is really cool. Matter of fact, let me just show it quickly because I think I'm just kind of wowed by the technology. So if I just put in early decision, for example, I can put this in here. It's going to, any of the content that we have around early decision, there you go, guys. It's going to go right to that part of
DSS profile.
you know,
So
a particular presentation, right? So it's hours and hours of content, which whatever questions you have, again, you just put it into the search, right? Or you can do a chat bot and ask it anything. The other thing is we have a private community that is just for our members, and again, moderated by experts every single day. So it's hopefully a very palpable price point for anybody. Where did I go here? $24.99 for anybody that wants it. Don't overthink that one, guys. Again, this is the first time we only done it, or the first time that we've done it. And also, in addition to the software, we have kind of that community that I think is super valuable. Now, some of you guys are probably thinking like, I need more help than just that, than just the software, than just kind of these, the DIY type. If you're a DIYer, right? That's what I would recommend for you, right? Or it's a great place to get started. Some of you are probably saying, well, I'd like Brian and or Dan to take over and just kind of guide us through this admissions process. That's where we have what we call our Wake Me Up When It's Over services. We're pretty proven here. We've been around for a long time. I think we have the top experts in the country. On average, our families save just under $70,000, okay? Hours, meaningful hours. So you can just go enjoy your kids' last year of high school or last couple of years. And the data shows as well, again, obviously there's no guarantees here, but the data shows 3 times more likely to get into one of your top choices if you work with one of our admissions experts, okay? So Brian or Dan or team. If you already work with an IEC, you don't need us on the admissions side of the fence. And if you are one of those families, you might want us just for the financial aid piece, okay? So I'm gonna actually grab this link and put it in the chat, because what we're doing, and we've, and again, for our groupies, you know that this is true. We've never done this steep of a discount where it's 25% off any of our comprehensive, again, Wake Me Up When It's Over packages. So if you just want financial aid help, for example, you're working with an IEC, we're covered on the admission side. You go to BC High, you got Brian as your counselor. You don't need the help on the admissions front, but I'd like some help on the financial aid front. We're going to help you identify which schools are going to give you the best deal. We're going to make sure you apply to competing schools so we can leverage them against one another. We do the FAFSA for you. We do the CSS profile for you. Think about it's like having a great CPA within this kind of college ecosystem, okay? If you just want help with financial aid, the flat fees, you know, $3,000, $29.99, but it actually expires tomorrow night. Or you can get it, you know, if you want to chop it up via monthly payments, $300 a month over. It's an 8-month schedule. Now there's a little bit of a finance fee baked up. I think it's 7.5%. 7.5% is the finance fee if you chop it up monthly, but for some of you, that's what you prefer. But again, so it's basically $300 a month over 8 months, or $22.49 if you buy by tomorrow night. And again, that's financial aid only. Here's what I'll say for Brian and Dan. If you wanted to work with either of these guys, their roster's likely going to be full this week. So there's some real urgency with them specifically, in addition to just kind of the discounts. For example, Melissa on our team, her class of 2025 roster is already full. These guys will have some more room if you're an underclassman. There's less urgency, right? But that's kind of that piece, okay? Now, again, everybody has access to this. I put it in the chat. If you are just looking for admissions help, okay, we have 2 options there. You have 20 hours with either Brian or Dan for all things admissions, right? So let's help build this list together, right? Let's help you figure out what major career path you might be thinking about. Let's make sure we nail this essay, right? More important than it ever has been. Let's make sure we nail the common applications and the supplements, right? If you buy it by tomorrow night, it's either $29.99 or $400 a month over 8 months. Okay. Now again, this is go look at any of our competition or any other kind of anybody else in the space. I think you're going to be number one. Find that the prices are very competitive, but again, if you think Dan and Brian know what they're talking about, I do. This is who you're going to be working with. If you want just kind of all-in admissions help and no cap, because I don't know if I said this, our admissions one package it's capped at 20 hours, right? So it's 20 hours is kind of the maximum there, which you should be able to get a meaningful amount done, but not necessarily everything. Whereas our more comprehensive admissions program, there's no cap in the hours. There's a cap on the amount of colleges. So that includes everything up to 10 colleges. Okay. So the essays, the supplemental essays, but up to 10 colleges. But guys, even if you apply to 15 colleges, once you get the 10, you're going to have the roadmap for the other 5. And you can also kind of bolt on a la carte, things like that. But if I don't want to manage this. I'm not an expert in this, and I want to maximize my kids' chances of getting in. And I don't want to have to be the one to be like, when are the deadlines? Have you started your rough draft? Right? Let these guys manage this for them. And then finally, a meaningful amount of folks we talk to say, look, I want help with admissions and I want help with financial aid. We have these combination packages, right? So you can do the combo one that includes the 20 hours of admissions plus the financial aid piece, and obviously the combo two with no limits on the hours plus the financial aid piece. And obviously, these, again, we've never done discounts this big. You see what those look like. But the urgency here is outside of the discounts is also if you want to work specifically with Brian or Dan, if you're like, those guys seem to know what they're talking about. Now would be the time. And again, for Dan specifically, if the combo packages speak to you or the financial aid only packages speak to you, those are right in his wheelhouse. Whereas Brian's focused on admissions only. So hopefully that's helpful. I mean, again, we'll talk about this again tomorrow, but again, these guys you can only work with so many families one-on-one. And again, as you might expect, if you're impressed like I am, always with these guys, their rosters are just about full here. But at a minimum, if you're looking at that and going, hey, look at that's way outside my price point and not anything for me to even consider, that's no problem. We totally get it. Take advantage of our free resources. Or if $24.99, if $25 is in your budget, at least get into our club, right? Get in the club, join the community, have all the access to the software and everything else that we're doing on a weekly basis, and have the ability to get in our moderated chat and AI moderated chat, and we'll help you, right? I mean, that's what we're here for, guys. I mean, obviously, we want everybody to hire us, right? But not everybody is a good fit for our more comprehensive packages, and you probably know where you fit. So take advantage. And the other thing that I will offer, and let me put this email in here. If you are strongly considering one of our comprehensive packages, right? If you're considering one of our Wake Me Up When It's Over packages, whether it's admissions, whether it's financial aid, or both, and you just kind of want to have a quick gut check call with one of us, whether it's me or Brian or Dan or whatever, write into support@collegeaidpro.com, and they'll help. Our Anne Marie or Kia will help facilitate how you get on to our calendar and whoever you want to connect with. So hopefully that's helpful. But look, here's another really important takeaway. Show up tomorrow night no matter what. Number one, we have a surprise. We always end the last night with a pretty fun surprise, and we're pretty stoked about. Oh, actually, you know what, Kathy, if you're on here, there's another deliverable that I did not get yet. Hold on one second, guys, because everybody that showed up live gets their free admissions checklist. Let us
Yeah.
not forget.
While
Let me-
Matt's looking for that, what I'll say is,
Yeah.
I had some great meetings with some of our 2025s the past couple nights. We worked on essay brainstorming this week. So some of my more favorite kind of meetings, just kids kind of opening up, talking about some real interesting ideas that they have for essays. All the families right now have really solid college lists that they're working through. And so we're making good progress. But what I would say about the families too is they're not stressed out because they got a plan in place. And I think that's one of the biggest things. I had a parent say to me the other night, we're not saying that this isn't going to be as stressful. And Dan, I know says the same thing. I don't guarantee a stress-free process because it's impossible. But I guarantee an empowered process. And I think that's what families are starting to feel.
Yeah, 100%, right. And I just put an admissions checklist that I think is pretty helpful in the chat there, right? So it has starting freshman year, but obviously I know a lot of you are kind of it's officially game time. So hopefully you'll find that helpful with some kind of like, here's where the 8 ball is and here's where you want to be in relation to that.
Hey, Matt, they're also asking about the $25 special, the membership.
Yes. Yes. So thank you, everybody. So look at so with this link that I put in the chat, because we were doing a one-time only special last night, but we got some I don't know, call it backlash today for folks that missed it or relate to it. So we're extending it through this week. So if you want to get on the premium wait, I'm not sharing, sorry guys. If you want to get into the premium version here, again, I'll put this into the chat. Okay, so again, this gives you full access to our platform and all those other, I think, great benefits, right? In addition to that, just go to this link, and again, you just say join the club, and it'll bring you to your checkout page, and you will be in business, right? And actually another thing, because I personally think this cap GBT is pretty cool. Let me just show it real quick. And then Brian, Dan, you guys get out of here whenever you want, but I'll show this real quick. So within kind of, and again, this is just for premium members too. This cap GPT, I can say, what is early decision, right? And again, put in whatever you want here, but we've kind of taught this AI robot everything that we know, all of our experts. And again, any question you have in the space, guys, you can either get it from the AI bot that we have taught, or just go to our private forum or show up live once a week. And again, you get all your questions answered, right? So again, for those of you that know that the one-on-one help just isn't a want or isn't in the price point, whatever, this is what we have for you. But again, the theme that you will continue to hear from us: don't go at this alone. Use our free resources, use our competition. Don't do what kind of some of the folks on the other side of the fence want you to do, which is go at it alone. So Dan, Brian, thank you as always. Tonight was no different. I learned a whole bunch. And again, guys, make sure that you show up tomorrow night, regardless of what you're thinking in terms of test prep. And again, if you're considering getting some help, I can vouch for these guys on every front imaginable. So thanks again, and obviously go Celtics, right?
It's good to have a night off for the heart.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, guys.